So we're now recording, and I'm going to start screen share. There we go. And theoretically it'll work. Come on. There we go. Okay, so I'm also using the open captioning feature, and that way you'll be able to see the text as I speak. Sometimes that can be helpful. Now, it will sometimes make errors and be unintentionally funny, but that's okay. I wanted to start off this morning, first of all, welcoming everybody. I know it's the end of the semester for you. And before we jump into our topic, I thought we'd just take a minute to have everybody share what's going on in your life and at your college. So let's just start with Jessica, because she's the one right under me on our list. So you talked a little bit about what's been going on, but.
So, I mean, this whole transition to completely online, I think has been a bit chaotic, and many people have really changed their focus quite a lot. Now there has been good teamwork involved to get this thing accomplished, but I think some of the work of the organization has kind of taken a little bit of a back seat, and we really have not made the progress. You know, at the beginning of the semester, we have set certain initiatives. We've had charges for our committees, and I feel like really things have slowed down quite a lot for that. So I suppose it's not surprising that we haven't quite accomplished what we would have set out to do for this semester. We are completely online for sure for the summer. I cannot say for certain for the fall. I think we endeavor to go back to face-to-face, but that's yet to be finalized or revealed. And I think the next month or so will definitely give us better guidance about what's prudent.
Yeah, I found talking to our colleges that some of them are still planning to be entirely online in the summer and even in the fall. But many of them, and that's why I wanted to ask you about your program, have said that they're going to do all of the academic transfer courses online, but the career and technical education courses that require specialized labs, they were going to have on campus, but run them at 25% capacity. So, you know, divide the classes into small groups of say 7 at a time and spread them out in those specialized labs. So I didn't know if those kinds of things were under consideration where you are.
Certainly they are, and I do believe in several of our technical programs. You are correct that we're kind of anticipating that we are staggering activities such as that, different labs and such. Now my situation's a little bit different in nursing. Our clinical groups are between 8 and 10 for those courses anyway, but we are so dependent on our institutions to be able to even offer that. Like, we rely on them kind of opening those doors and letting us in to be able to, you know, to do that. So second year students, the Board of Nursing has said that yes, they will be able to accept those alternative formats that fall under simulation, you know, to be acceptable. But these first year students are going to be in a real bind because they're going to have to make up several of these hours because let's face it, you can't have a nurse go into the field. They haven't laid a hand on a patient. You know, it's translated the same to a welder. Like, okay, you know, you can't have not done projects and demonstrated these skills and be able to be certified. Same with electrician or plumbing or HVAC. You can't go into those fields without demonstrating it. So it's been really interesting. And again, in my situation, we're at their mercy for them to open those doors again. So it's yet to be finalized, those details.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Jessica. Sabrina, tell us what's been going on with you.
So this whole time that everything has been transitioning to online, we've been kind of asked by administration to kind of rein in and not necessarily be too aggressive with marketing our services, but come this, I think, toward the end of this month, toward the end of this month, we're going to have our normal May meeting, and that's the time that we brainstorm for our IE goals. And we're also going to take that time to create more of a marketing plan for our online services and our online instruction. So there's not been a whole lot going on with us, but we really hope to ramp it up in the summer. I think we were just asked to kind of hold back just because we had so many faculty that were really not used to teaching online, and they were just very stressed, and so we wanted to give them some space before they were, because like I think we all went through that, but you know, in the very beginning, it was like, try this webinar, try this new service, try this. It's like you're just like letting these kind of, I don't know if you guys saw the video of the kid with his dad throwing the tennis balls for him to hit, and he just was standing there like, That's kind of how I think we all felt, you know, just think that now that we're, you know, we have our sea legs, I think hopefully in the summer people will be more amenable to us reaching out to them and offering services. I was just going to add on to the nursing thing. My campus does serve a lot of nurses. They were in a separate area, like we were renting out these buildings across the street. They got moved into our building, and so I've kind of towards the, like spring break, I was really trying to become like almost like a medical librarian, just learning all that I can about what standards they have, all the things that, you know, they need as far as their collection and skills to serve them as far as like reference. But I was going to say our nursing students, some of our hospitals that they do clinicals in, they're like, please come back, like we desperately need you guys. Then some of the hospitals are like, no, you guys, we don't even need to take on one other thing. There's just too much going on right now. So it's kind of like the fact that our campuses are so spread out. We have one in a rural area, Gainesville. We have more metropolitan area down around here. It's you can't have one cohort doing clinicals and the other not, and then everybody's left behind. You also can't take on a new cohort with that, you know, because then you're basically asking one instructor to teach way more students, like online and in person. It's just apparently a mess from what I hear, but that's about all I have.
Great. Spencer, tell us what's been going on with you.
Okay, well, it has definitely been a semester. So, like everyone else, we transitioned to all online. We had a lot of support from across our campuses for everyone, for faculty and for staff. I had some unique challenges because I had 2 early college classes, which are 14-year-olds that are freshmen in high school. So those came up with some unique challenges because a lot of those students didn't have internet access. The school districts did provide that for them, but there were some different challenges trying to have Google Chrome, the Google Chromebooks, work with some of the different programs and documents, and trying to make sure that they had everything that they needed. So we had some different challenges that way. And of course, we had to alter some things with the way that we proctored tests, and in moving forward, you know, we're online for academic courses for summer 1. And a decision for summer 2 will be made later. So we'll see what happens there. But like everyone else, our career tech will be on campus, but with limited numbers. So we're kind of one of those situations where we'll just wait and see what happens. And hopefully we hope for the best, and we'll see how everything starts looking as we get into June.
Thanks, Spencer. It sounds like you're having a lot of the same experiences that we've been hearing from Jessica and Sabrina. Holly, tell us what's been going on with you.
Good morning.
Morning.
So yeah, it's a crazy time. I'm not in the classroom. I'm the director of distance learning. So when they said move everything online, my world kind of blew up. That means get everybody online. We have a great group of faculty. It was a good experience looking back on it. You know, in the rush of things, it could have gone a lot worse. But I think from what people have told me that it went really well. We already had a lot of things set up that looking back, I'm like, oh, if I had known that we were going to have a pandemic and everything was going to close, I'm glad, you know, I would have done those things. So we had video software, we've had Zoom, we've had Canvas training where, you know, everybody that was using Canvas already had to be trained. And so we really only had, I don't know, I think less than 10 people that hadn't had our Canvas training. We have a mentor system here on campus, so that helped a lot to have faculty that could, you know, just jump in and help people also. So it's a crazy time, but it's, I don't know, I think we've learned a lot, and I think it's actually pushed our college into, like, out of our comfort zone. And I hope that as things do get back to normal, that we kind of create a new normal and we continue to use some of the things that we've been forced to use. Because I think we've seen some good things come out of that, being able to connect with students remotely. And so as far as my work with CALI, that's kind of, it was put on hold, and then I tried to hop back in there a lot in the last 2 weeks and coordinating with the instructor that coordinates criminal justice. That hasn't really been successful. So I'm kind of just winging it. And I talked to Chris a little bit about what I've been sending her, what I've been writing up. But I've been putting notes in there for you of this is what I would recommend. It's not necessarily what's happening. So I hope I can have more collaboration with him throughout the summer, but I don't know what that'll look like.
So did you find that many of your instructors already had fully built out online presence, or were there quite a few who were really very traditional face-to-face instructors who had to make a major shift?
For the majority, they have at least taught online before. There is a handful that had never, and quite frankly, we're very vocal in saying, I will never teach online. I will never use the technology that's offered. I'll retire. And in some meetings with our leadership team, it's kind of been a joke where originally we were like, holy cow, we're about to have 5 people that are just going to quit. They're going to say, no, we're not finishing this semester, but they didn't. We didn't have anybody walk out. Everybody has made it work. And I actually received an email earlier this week from one of those instructors that has had no online presence before now. And she has told me that she wants to go through the full Canvas training this summer, and that she's going to be teaching online in the fall, even if her face-to-face classes are allowed to go back face-to-face. Which is, I mean, to me, I'm like, I mean, if you could find a positive in this, that's it. My personal favorite is hybrid classes because you can get the best of both worlds. But I mean, just to see that everybody knows about the resources that they have here at the college now, I think that's been a positive.
Yeah, that's great. I know many of the colleges have said that they're going to require, you know, that all courses, whether they're plan to be taught face-to-face be able to shift entirely online without disruption. Yeah, it should be fully built out.
Yeah.
And in terms of assessment, in terms of CALI, if you have it in a learning management system, then your assessments can be more easily harvested. They can be, tied to the learning objectives within the courses. And so it actually facilitates a lot of the work that we're doing with this group.
So that's probably why we are where we, were, because we did start, a year or two ago, we started moving all of our assessments to Canvas so that we can gather that information and send it to Chris for our leaks. We're not there on the workforce side for all of them to have it, but it's a goal. It's an administrative outcome for them this year. I don't know if we'll reach that or not, but it did come down that yes, that's the goal for everybody to at least be using Canvas for their LEAP, their learning outcome assignment.
Right, that's great. Veronica, what's been going on with you?
Good morning. Just the same as everybody else. It's been challenging to say the least.
Do you have anything else you want to add, or?
No, just like everybody else. Thank you.
Michael, how are things been going with you?
Hold on one second. I'm in the car. Okay, so everything's been going good here. I have to give kudos to Holly and her team though first. Her department has been awesome throughout this transition. My biggest challenge really has been with the chemistry labs because I teach chemistry, and I've gone through many different iterations of how I'm actually doing the labs. So like first I was like, okay, well, let me just do the lab myself and I'll provide the students the data and everything. And I quickly found out that was actually took me about probably about 10 to 12 hours to do one lab. And I was like, this is not feasible. There's just no way I could do that for 5 more labs. But then I just transitioned to doing some virtual labs. Our library, the director of the library provided these websites for the sciences to help out with the virtual labs and everything, or with resources. And so I basically went through that and I was like, okay, well, let me do one lab. The first lab went out great, but then the second one, I was using a Java lab, and then I found out that Chromebooks can't use Java applications. And so I'm like, okay, well, I can't do that. So then I just transitioned into doing kind of dry labs and things like that. So it was just kind of a constant change in how I was actually teaching the course. That's been my major challenge. And then I guess the funniest thing I realized was I proctored my final exams using what's called honor log. And as I was reviewing the footage, I was like, okay, I need to put in statements that you have to be fully clothed because apparently that's a really big thing. There were at least 2 students who were not fully clothed while taking their test. And so I don't think they were guys, so they just didn't have a shirt on. So it wasn't very, well, I now know what to put into the instructions now. So anyways.
Things you never thought you'd have to include.
Exactly. And so, yeah. But yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been I've taught online before, but my face-to-face classes are different from my online classes. So it's as if I just never taught online transitioning. And that was very difficult for me. But because I'm the type of person where it's like I want to have everything all ready and set to go for the whole semester. And so I had to change my outlook a little bit in doing that.
Yeah. Well, and you've highlighted, I think one of the major challenges when you have to move online are those lab courses. You know, that's been one of the reasons why many institutions don't offer some of those courses online, because they haven't been able to identify virtual labs that are effective. I know some of them have kits that they can have the students buy, and then they do things at home. So it's an interesting challenge, you know?
Yeah. So normally when I teach online, I have a lab kit that the students buy, but obviously that wasn't an option halfway into the semester. So
Right. Yeah. And talking to some of our colleges, you know, I'd said they were going to be doing the credit transfer courses online, and the CTE courses, things that need a specialized lab on campus, but they're also looking at having things like biology and chemistry be online, and then tell each instructor you get 5 lab times over the course of the semester. And so you have to figure out how to meet your objectives with, you know, 5 opportunities to come in and use the lab. You know, and then they're using social distancing to break the classes up into smaller groups so that they can do it. So that's one thing that I've seen, but it'll be interesting to find out from all of you as you go into the next year, you know, and think long term, what you choose to do. So,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Michael. Do you have something else?
I mean, I was just thinking that's one of the things that I want to kind of plan is with the, at least with some of the labs, is having a kind of a backup, kind of like having what I did with the one particular lab that took me a long time, because I had a video of the experiment and I had all the data and everything. So ultimately, I would probably like to convert all my labs that have that option so I could just throw it up. But again, like I said, it took me almost a full week to get one lab up.
Right.
And good for the students to use. So, and then the funny thing was when I actually graded that lab, I realized that there was a major mistake. And so I just had to alter my grading for that lab anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, and see, that ties into assessment, right? I mean, you know, if you're going to be assessing them on it, but you've built in an error, then you have to rethink everything. Although
Exactly.
if you liked the things that you were able to produce, it may be worth doing that 10 to 12 hours of work, you know, for each lab, so that you have those and can use them in the future.
Yeah, that is my plan. So that's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to spend some of my summer doing. So
Great. And then Chris, tell me from your perspective, as you've been supporting your entire college, what you've seen this semester and how that has impacted your data collection, the kinds of assessment you're doing. Are you going to, you know, collect data this semester, even though it's so aberrant, or are you just kind of, you know, letting this one go? What have y'all been talking about?
Well, we're collecting some, but we've also, because we know faculty have really been put under the gun with a lot of extra work, we've told them that we're not doing the assessment testing in the classes this semester. Well, obviously we can't because we don't get much of a response online anyways. But we also collect artifacts each semester, and we've decided not to collect them this semester. And I'm not so sure we're going to necessarily collect. We expect the LEAPs to be entered, but a lot of that's going to be Holly providing us that information. And I don't know how the workforce side is going to go, especially with the courses that need to be, you know, on the campus. So we have tried as much as we can to help alleviate some of the issues that faculty need to be involved in because they are overworked this semester.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, so now let's go ahead and move into our session for today, where we're talking about analyzing and using assessment data. So these are our outcomes. Once we're done with this session today, you should be able to develop a plan to share data results and close the loop. And probably just as important, if not more, I think, develop a plan to improve the program or discipline. Because we do a lot of collecting data, but if you don't have a mechanism in place to do something with it, to actually use it to inform the changes that you make to your program, then it's not as valuable as it could be. So we have been working our way around the assessment cycle, and we are now in the last two, collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data, and then acting on results to improve learning. So this morning, we're going to be focusing on collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data, and then we'll do the last section, acting on results to improve learning, after lunch. So what I'd like for you to do, I sent you an email that had all of the documents. They're also in the CALI site, but I'm also going to pull it up so that you can see the handout itself. But basically, it's these first two questions. So how have you and your program shared program level assessment results in the past? So what were things like, coming into this program? And then if you haven't, what are you planning in terms of how to share assessment results? And then the second one, which is the closing the loop piece, how do you currently in your program act on the program level assessment results? If you don't currently have that loop in place, how do you plan to act on them? So let me pull up the handout. So this is your handout document. Like I said, you have it in the email. It is also in course site. But these are the ones that I want you to focus on. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes to think through this, to write down a couple notes, and then we'll have everybody share. So let's say, at 10:30, sorry, at 10:37, which is 5 minutes, then we'll start talking again. So I'll give you a minute to think through these. Okay, so let's talk through this a little bit. Let's go in reverse order from our first discussion. So, Michael, tell me how you and your program have shared program level assessment results in the past, or if not, how you plan to do it, and then also how you close the loop, how you act on the data that you gather.
Okay, so wonderful. I have to go first.
Well, I'm just mixing it up, so yep.
That's okay. I'm in my office now, so things are getting a little bit back to normal. So the way we share program level assessment, I guess, is through our LEAPS assessment, which Chris is the expert at here. That's how we share things across the college, I suppose. And I suppose we'll probably just continue to do that. It's very hard in my program because it's chemistry. I'm a one-person program, so it's kind of just me. So I guess I'm sharing it with myself, program-wise. But again, my division chair gets all that information as well. So how do you act on the program level assessments results? I suppose it's just a matter of looking to see how things are going and what changes I need to do in a classroom to actually increase those results. So I guess I would be using those results, so it would be changing the way I'm teaching the class.
And so do you have an instrument that you currently use to identify and plan for the changes that you're going to make it the next year based on the data?
I guess that would be our LEAPS results. I guess I don't understand what you're asking.
No, I mean, I think that's it. I think you use LEAPS, and LEAPS is the instrument that's providing you the data. And then based on that, you're making your plans for the next year. So setting different goals or identifying something that you're going to be changing or adding.
Exactly, yes.
Great. All right, Veronica.
We look at the data results, and then we do meet in end of the semester, summer, if we find time. And then we kind of just discuss how to improve it for the next time that course or class is assessed. And what can we do to have the student successfully complete? So maybe we're not maybe we need to adjust instructions, or maybe we need to have somebody come in and show them how to present to an audience. So that's what we do.
Okay, great. So you meet as a group and then decide together what changes you want to make. And are those applied consistently across the program? Does every instructor implement whatever those changes are?
Pretty much, because we're small. It's just it's three to five faculty that those courses are assessed. So we're pretty much. I mean, we kind of figure out what's good for the program and then go from there.
Right. Great. Okay, so Spencer.
Yeah, mine's a little unique in the sense that my course is part of our QEP. So we have a director of the QEP who looks at the data. Holly gets her the results that are in Canvas, and then she disaggregates that data, and it's shared individually. The courses are shared with the faculty member, but then of course they're looked at holistically, and then she shares them with various committees across the campus. Also, data is collected when we have face-to-face classes. Data is collected because the director of the QEP goes in and does small group samples and interviews students in order to get feedback that way as well.
Right. Alrighty. Sabrina.
Okay. Okay, so we haven't had an instructional assessment plan in the past. Our goals have been purely operational. My assessment plan for CALI has shifted from being programmatic and including all campuses to what we can just do on the Corinth campus. So I just, you know, as you know, I was sharing what I've learned in CALI and all the things that I would like to do and getting feedback from other campus librarians. I just didn't, everybody kind of does their own thing, and I'm kind of respecting that. I'm in no position to tell people what to do right now, but I can, I do have like a lot of influence with what's going on in Corinth because we work so well as a team just locally. So I'm just shifting what we do for Corinth. So usually what we've done in the past is if it's a class that all of the librarians teach, we will, because we're all kind of just there anyway, we tend to cross paths. Like we have an evening librarian and somebody that works with me in the morning, and then myself. So just kind of as we cross paths, we talk and, okay, well, what classes did you do today? What went well, what didn't? And then we will make notes and then remember for the next person or the next time that teaches that class what they can do to improve it. If it's just, sometimes we have instructors that only want one specific librarian. And in that case, we always, that's why I had such a hard time. I was talking about like, there's a lot of things that were locked away in my office. It's those handouts, like we print out the handouts and then on the back of them, we write down exactly what we did, what seemed to fall flat, what questions the students had, so that we can anticipate what we should do next time, or to prepare rather, what we should do next time. So sometimes librarians will have notes for just specific classes. For activities, things like honors presentations and tours, those notes get uploaded into our shared network drive. And so it's just a lot of times for those, it's like the luck of the draw who is asked to do a tour, or who has to give a presentation, or who has to work with an honor student. And so a lot of those things we can't really talk about like right after they happen, especially in the evening. Like, you know, I'm gone, the evening librarian did a tour. Okay, she'll put those notes in the J drive, which is our shared drive. And then as far as acting on them, so sometimes we will even have a meeting toward the end of the semester or just at the beginning of the semester, and we pull out those notes about what we were, you know, wanting to change, and then we brainstorm what things that we could do differently. So sometimes it's a debriefing right after the class. Sometimes it's a meeting like during our intersection. It's just, it's not really set in stone. But I think that CALI kind of really brought forth that we need to have a, you know, structured meeting, you know, during intercession, no matter what. And maybe that just the in-passing debriefing isn't really going to cut it anymore.
Although I think that you have a really good, you know, recursive method of throughout the semester, you know, doing these kinds of formative assessments and sharing information so that, you know, you can immediately meet the needs. And so I wouldn't want you to lose the benefit of those things. You know, yes, you do want to have a structured official time, you know, when you take all of those notes from a given semester and then plan ahead, you know, what changes you might want to make, refine it for the next year. But I think that, you know, throughout the semester, those informal discussions that you're having are extremely beneficial. So I would hate for you to lose that. You know, you don't want to ever give up something that's good that's working when you know, move to a more structured system. So I would say, you know, the fact that you're uploading notes, the fact that you're putting the documentation on the back of those handouts is giving you that ongoing documentation that, yeah, you can talk about it informally, but then you have that formal meeting, you know, at the end of each semester. So I think that's great work. All right, Jessica.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in. It says as far as how have you or your program shared program level assessment data. I'm going to say it is very different things to share it with administration than it is to share it with your fellow faculty. And therein lies our biggest disconnect, I think, here. So my administration is responsible for sharing, okay, the biggest indicator, how do our graduates do on the NCLEX, right? This is the ultimate goal, that they pass, right? That certifying board. And so they certainly share that data. And then also a lot of emphasis is placed on student survey as well, about how we are meeting those needs of the students. Based on established, not just the program learning outcomes, but the standards that are established by our certifying agency. And so we share data with administration. My administration shares with the uppers, right? And then also has to share with their the certifying board, both the Board of Nursing and what's ASIN is our certifying body, right, for our program. And so it is their general responsibility to gather and share that. And so the coordinators have to share with their administration, who then shares with their uppers, and then the certifying bodies is what ends up happening. Myself, as also being one of the faculty members, I will say that it very much goes uphill, but not much trickle downhill on that. We definitely, as faculty, hear, hey, what is our program success rate? How many of our graduates pass the NCLEX? And then we do get a general synopsis of what student surveys have said, but that is the end of it generally, unless you're part of that one committee, which is program effectiveness. And those members are more focused on collecting those specific data points, and then also being responsible for collecting it for our certifying bodies. So that's what we've done in the past. So then it talks about how do we act on that. Right now, really what the biggest thing that we've done is to go forward with doing a more intensive curriculum mapping, because over time, so many changes have been made within those little silos for a course that were never communicated uphill, right? Like they're making a lot of changes, but then it's not been related back and then translated into how does this ultimately contribute to us achieving those student learning outcomes. So really that's how we've responded to it, is now going back through that process to each course is responsible for directly relating what their course assignments are back to how does this contribute to them meeting the student learning outcomes. So that's how we've responded to it. Now, if it's on a bigger level and we're noticing we're not getting the success rates that we want to, maybe it's declined somewhat, those are changes that can go through. There's another committee called curriculum that looks at each individual course, and if any changes need to be made because we notice there's a gap, then it has to go then through the curriculum committee. But this also has a wider CNI process that has to happen on an institutional level, which is ridiculously cumbersome. That takes basically, hey, you laugh, but it's true. It can only be submitted once a year in March, once a year, and then it takes about 18 months for you to actually implement anything that you want to change. So that I have no power over, but we have to be very proactive and forward looking, because we can't just make a change overnight, you know, if it's anything substantive. Anyway, there you go.
No, that's great, because what you've done is identified all of the different stakeholders and the information that each one gets, right? You know, you have to meet the accreditors requirements. You have to have your, licensure and certifications at a certain level. And then you're going to go through program review every 2 years, right? And you've got your program effectiveness group that's sounds like is the one that drills down into what's happening in individual courses to make sure that students are learning all the things that they'll eventually have to demonstrate on that cumulative summative exam. And then
I was going to say my personal program actually initiated the program review process last academic year. And so I'll have to say this is one of those contributions that Marlon Moat has made to our institution, that now this is a more formal process. What I will communicate to my administration is this data that's being collected, that's great that it's pushed uphill, but again, it's not, we as faculty need to own that as well and be able to make changes. But I think it's going to be a way for it to be way more visible going through this formalized program review process that now is in place.
Yeah, it sounds like the missing piece is that program review has to include or at least go through a process where it goes back out to all of you as faculty, right? To both inform what happens in the review, but also respond to it, because you're the ones who will make those C&I proposals, right? To, revise a course or add a course or delete a course, all of those kinds of things. So it sounds like you're making some steps that way, but you're still seeing some opportunities for improvement, right? And at the beginning, way back when we started CALI, remember we talked about how you can do assessment for, compliance for other people. And that's the kind of thing that you were describing, that you've always done that, but you haven't had that assessment for yourself for improvement. And so it's good to see that you're moving that way.
I think so. Yeah, I think we've made some progress, but I think it's continuing that communication that really needs to happen, because the silos that exist between courses isn't helping us to move to that improvement.
Right. But, the process of doing the curriculum map helps everybody see how they're all connected, and like I said, the fact that you've already got such a nice sequence where you can see you really are moving students through in a way that helps them meet their goals, I think is going to be something that improves your program and the relationships between the people who teach in it. So it's all good. Okay, so Holly, you've got a broader perspective, and several people have talked about how you're the person who is instrumental in providing this information. So can you talk through what you're doing?
Yeah, I will try. So whenever we started with CALI, and again, like I'm working with criminal justice, but I don't really have anything to do with criminal justice, right? So it's really difficult. But that, from where trying to make it relevant, I guess, for my role and seeing what the faculty are going through, I kind of just took a step back and asked these questions at the very beginning whenever we started. And because whenever I was working with our coordinator and CJ, he, to be quite honest, he's like, what program review? I do a program review? I've never done a program review before. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I picked the wrong one to do, but it's been good because I've seen what we do with LEAPs, which are our learning outcomes, our annual learning outcomes for the courses. And so what I've constantly heard is that they're just not meaningful, that we have to pick this learning outcome and then we have to submit this data and that's all we do with it. And so also having the teaching background, I'm like, no, like that's crucial. We have to have this data because you have to know if what you're doing is working or if it's not working. And So really, I think what's come out of it for me about answering these questions about, yes, we do need to share our results, and we are sharing the LEAPS results for our courses, but I haven't seen the program reviews being shared between department chairs and faculty. And so that's what I've been working specifically with the workforce departments is it's just been the chairs that are doing these program reviews, and then the faculty aren't seeing them. And so working with Chris and the two department chairs in workforce, we've come together and we've built basically a new program review template. And looking at, you know, what our accreditation requires. And we also now have a new instructional designer that's part-time here at the college. And so they're working really closely now to go meet with the faculty and have the faculty help do these program reviews. I believe we have now like 5 mission statements for the different departments. And they're building some more, but like cosmetology never had a mission statement until last week. So that's exciting to see and to hear about. So, I mean, it is shared, I guess, that the chairs have been sharing, you know, the assessments, but it just kind of goes into Zytrax, I think, and then the faculty aren't using it. I don't want to say that's like a blanket statement for everybody. There are faculty that are using it, but it's just not like that everybody sees the meaning behind it. And so I don't know if I'm just rambling, but I think we're going in that track where we've recognized that we've got to make it more meaningful. We've got to have the faculty input.
Right. No, that's great. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, you know, is that when you do this, it has to be meaningful or you're not going to do anything with it, right? And you also have to give people the time and the support to be able to do something with it. Because otherwise, you know, if we're all teaching, you know, at least 5, but most people teach an overload, more than that, you know, without the support to make changes, you'll just roll into the next semester and do what you've been doing because it's already built, right? Yeah, and so that's why this closing the loop piece is so important. Okay. I don't know why, but I am locked on. Hang on. Okay. Took a minute. I had to fight with it so that I could get it working. All right. So now we're looking at data analysis. And basically you've been talking through some of the kinds of data that you are collecting and the kind of analysis that you do. And this is that piece where, you know, you've created the curriculum map, you've identified the assessments that you're going to do, and now you're having to figure out how to analyze it in a way that's going to make it meaningful for the people who are teaching in your program. So, of course, analysis is going to be different based on the type of data and criteria. You're also going to have some data that's numerical and some that's non-numerical. And we've heard from several of you that you have both kinds, right? You're going to have numerical data in terms of success rates on licensure exams, things like that. But you're also going to have the non-numerical data in terms of surveys, feedback from students, you know, discussions that you're having about what seems to be working and what isn't working. And so that qualitative data is going to have to be analyzed in a different way. And then you also are going to have different levels of analysis. So let's go ahead and look through it. So we've talked about numerical data. We also, throughout the CALI program, have been talking about how you have to be sure that you don't focus your assessment only on things like grades that are indirect assessments, right? So the final grade in a class, we know, unless you have your grading system set up so that a student can't pass your class without mastering every single sub-skill in the course, that a grade in a class is not going to be as useful as some kind of direct assessment. And so that's why those rubrics are important. That's why having your outcomes tied to direct assessments of those specific skills are important. And then the numerical data can be that score on the rubric, can be the grade if the grade is tied to that specific assessment. But then there's also all of the non-numerical data. And I know sometimes when we're looking at assessment for compliance, we focus on the numerical data, that really high level data, right? Your grade distribution, the number of people who persist through the end of a course, those kinds of things. And faculty will often say that that picture, that old kind of data that they would get, that would just give them, the high level indirect information, didn't give them the full picture. Sometimes faculty will feel like it's not giving the true picture of what happens in the class, because there is so much non-numerical data, so much qualitative information that's happening that doesn't get captured in those kinds of assessment methods. And so those are things like observations, presentations, essays, posters, artwork, performances, and just those, surveys, those informal discussions, affective things, how engaged students are in an activity, what they say about their experience of doing a particular project. So that's the first thing, right? What types of data do you have? Now from your curriculum map what types of data you are planning on having. And so that's then going to inform the kinds of analyses you're going to be able to do. You also had to set criteria, and those are the goals that you have at the program level for the success. How are you going to measure success? How are you going to know whether or not you're successful as a program in doing the things that you want to do, right? And so this first one is something that you might see in a program like Jessica's, right? 85% of students will pass the state licensure exam on the first attempt because you've set that 85% mastery as demonstrated through passing the exam as your goal, right? That what constitutes program effectiveness. And then the second one is an example of a goal that would be met through a course or courses, right, within a program. So when they're taking, for example, a practicum, right, an internship. So 75% of intern supervisors will report that interns had good research skills. And so what that means is that there's got to be some kind of instrument, right? Some kind of survey, some kind of report that you're getting from those supervisors where they have criteria and a rubric and are rating them. So those are some of the things that we know you've already built into your curriculum map, but you want to start thinking about, okay, so I've built this in, I'm going to be doing this kind of assessment, but what kind of data is it going to yield? And based on that, what kind of analysis can I do? The next thing to think about, and we talked a little bit through this when we had our earlier discussion, but when does analysis occur, right? Well, we know from your curriculum maps that it can serve as a guide for when analysis can be conducted. Clearly, when you look at a particular sub-goal, right, one of those learning outcomes, that at the point where you're actually demonstrating mastery, where you're finally assessing it, you're going to be able to analyze, right? But until they actually get to the point where you're doing that assessment for mastery, you're not going to be able to do the analysis yet. Some of you have talked about how you do things on an annual cycle. Some of you have talked about how you do analysis on a semesterly cycle, right, at the end of every term. But there are also times when you may be doing analysis over a longer period of time. And so you talked about that as well, the program reviews that might happen every 2 years. Or if your outcomes are going to be related to something like the QEP, right? The QEP has a multi-year process. And so your analysis may happen, you may do some kinds of formative analysis throughout it, but you're going to be doing that summative analysis at the end of the QEP period. And so it may be a multi-year system. Or with program review, right? Maybe every 2 years. If you're doing something as part of the core objectives for the state, some of the colleges are actually doing assessments on that every year, but most of them actually rotate through the 6 and may do 2 every year, right? So they might just do, you know, communication and personal responsibility 1 year, and then social responsibility and teamwork the next year. And so you do want to think about when that analysis is going to happen. Okay, so here's an example. And this one, as you can tell, is built based on the core objectives for the state. So we see, you know, communication, critical thinking, teamwork, personal responsibility, and social responsibility. You can see in this case that it's for English as a discipline. So let's say we're doing your program review, right, for English as a discipline. And you're going to, because English is one of the core courses, you've decided that you're going to build your assessment plan based on the core objectives that this discipline has to meet. You can see that they chose to create AAC and U value rubrics to do the assessments, and that their criteria is that they have to get at least a 2 out of 4. Okay, so the 2 for them is satisfactory. And then when you look at the collection plan, you'll see that they have it broken into even years and odd years. So if this is 2020, then they would be doing, you know, the assessment of communication in English 1302 this semester. And they would be doing teamwork in English 1301 this semester. And then the other ones would appear in the odd year. So does that make sense?
Yes, it's pretty clear.
Okay. Because I'm just babbling, so y'all have to jump in if you have questions or comments. All right, so let's look at another one. And this one is actually from a previous year CALI participants plan. Okay, so in this case, we have the TCC Construction Management Technology Program, and you'll see they've got 5 different learning outcomes, and their measurement instruments are lab exercises. They've set the criterion as 80% or above. And because this is part of their curriculum map, you're seeing that there are a variety of different courses, CNBT 1346, CNBT 1300, CNBT 2266. And so 3 of those are capstone, and they're all going to be assessed in the same one. And then the other 2, which are lower level, right, more introductory skills, we're getting in 1346 and 1300. But you'll notice that they are assessing these every semester, right? Because the courses are offered every semester, and these labs within the courses are offered every semester. And so this is a different kind of data collection than the one that we saw in the previous slide for an entire program and the core objective. So this may look more like what you would be doing in your curriculum map. Okay, so now We're moving on to the next activity. Okay, so what I want you to do is using your curriculum map, just take one of your SLOs and provide a name for one of the data methods that you plan to use. Identify what the performance criteria is, what kind of data you will collect, and what you plan to do in terms of analysis, and when it will be analyzed and at what frequency, who will analyze the data. Okay, and I will give you, I'm just running this thing all over the place. You have this, so you can look at it on your own machine. I'll also keep it up so you can look at it. But I'm going to give you 10 minutes to work through this, and then we'll share these back out. So at 11:25, we'll come back together. Okay, so let's talk through this and see what you've put down. Instead of calling on people, I'm just going to let you volunteer.
Okay.
Yay, Jessica. All right.
I'm totally fine with it. Mine's actually pretty clear cut, so I think it's a nice example to start with. So on the first question, you're asking with your fellow program, it says list your SLO, and mine was demonstrate the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that ensure a culture of safety in practice. And so then it says name one of the data methods. And this is going to be direct supervision of skills in the clinical or skills lab environment. What performance criteria will you use? Certainly as a bar, 75% is our passing bar. However, within any of these checkoff rubrics, there are critical steps basically that must be adhered to be designated as being safe performance. So if this student, because it talks about the criteria, if they do not meet the critical objectives and part of it before the analysis, they won't be able to pass or progress in the course is what will ultimately happen for that. So we're going to have numerical data because they get certain amount of points for each step in the process that they adhered to and how well they performed in that particular category or behavior. But then also we're going to have non-numerical data because we have input from the instructor about, their clinical reasoning skills. Were they able to communicate appropriately? Did they conduct themselves in a certain manner? That's also non-numerical data that comes into that picture. And we have a part of that on our actual clinical evaluation form that can be reflected on. So as far as data analysis types, we have just numerical data that's going to be analyzed. Those are reports of different grades that they received on those certain checkoff or evaluation forms. But then also the administration will have to look at their performance as far as requirements for progression in the program. Because let's say a student wasn't successful on this catheter insertion or whatever, or medication administration is one of the bigger ones. If they couldn't do that safely, then they couldn't progress in the course. And then we have a policy that says if this happens in 2 successive courses, then they can no longer progress in the program, if that makes sense. When will it be collected? Every semester, because each course that they go through, either skills or clinicals, this type of, they have certain checkoffs and safety criteria that have to be met for them to progress to the next course. And who will analyze the data? Both the clinical or skills instructor as well as the administrator, because again, they have to have met these criteria successfully for them to progress in the course.
Great. All right. So it sounds like you've got a good plan for this. And is this description typical of the way all of your SLOs will be evaluated? I'm just curious.
Some of them are a little different as far as the way that we're going to, to assess them, because it could be in many different ways. For example, some of the clinical reasoning will do things like concept maps, or communication. We may do many different methods. It could be face-to-face with a patient. It could be in an organized written SBAR, which is situation, background, assessment, and recommendation. So each of them have unique ways, I would say, in the way that they'll be evaluated. I would say all of them are going to have to be evaluated on an every semester basis. though, because again, these skills have to be demonstrated for them to continue to progress in the program.
Great. All right. Thank you. Have another volunteer?
I'll go.
Okay.
For one of our SOLs, it's specialized knowledge, applied tools, and technologies to common to the fashion industry. And then we'll use, the student will need to create a pattern and a garment. And we use a rubric to, for number 3, to the criteria for the SOL. And they need to complete the garment, and then they'll get a grade for the data. And then we review this about, depending on when it's offered, it might be, it's usually once a year, because each class is offered once a year. And then it's reviewed by faculty.
Great. So do you use a rubric for the pattern making and the construction?
Yes, we do. And we just want to make sure that they're using the correct techniques for both patterning and sewing, what the industry requires.
And so in terms of performance criteria, they have to have a certain number or level on the rubric for each one of those sub-skills?
Correct. Yes.
Great. All right. Sabrina, I think you were ready to go.
Okay, so a lot of the SLOs that I picked came from the ACRL information literacy frameworks, and so those are things that students should either be able to do, or those are dispositions that they have. And one of them is formulate questions for research based on information gaps or on re-examination of existing, possibly conflicting information. One of the classes that immediately came to mind is our Speech 1315. One of our instructors brings us in for doing a persuasive speech instruction on controversial topics. This is one of the instruction sessions where students are kind of like, I already know what I need to know on my topic. It's very personal to me. I mean, they're asked to pick something that's personal and relevant to them. And so they feel like they just know all there is to know about it. And so, but they're being asked to, bring in outside sources. So one of the assessment methods that could be used for that is something called a research log. And so the student will go through a basically kind of like a dry run of their research, like what they'll be doing when they're actually going through the steps. They write down what keywords they started with, and usually those are pulled from their thesis or their position statement. Those get turned into keywords. And then from there, we would be looking for, did they find anything? If not, did they brainstorm synonyms? And then how did they use any of the narrowing limiters? So publication date, scholarly articles, things like that. And then if they used any of the Boolean operators, which are and or not, it will narrow, broaden, or exclude things from your search. And so that could be, it sounds very hairy. Like a student will have, everybody's research log is going to be completely different because everybody's researching different things. And it's also kind of a brain map of how you think. Your ability to be nimble and change the way that you were thinking about something. But what you can do is there are hallmarks of a successful search pattern or search stream, and like the things that I just listed, like narrowing, using Boolean operators, that kind of thing. So the rubric could be the existence of those things and to what extent they were successful. And then as far as, so I think that was number 3 would be the criteria, right? So What type of data? So a lot of it is quantitative, but to really do justice and learn anything from it, qualitative notes giving examples of, you know, common successes or common failures, that's really going to help us. Like if everybody is just completely glossing over the limiters, or they're completely glossing over how to use the Boolean operators, that's something that we'll know to hit harder next time in the course. And then a huge thing is, we always tell students, hey, if one database didn't work, try another. These are all just things that you have at your disposal. They're tools in your tool belt. And it's a red flag for us if we see somebody just hanging out in that one database, completely floundering and failing over and over. So if they're able to move into a different database and apply the skills there. And then as far as data analysis, yeah, I think I covered that, like what worked and what didn't. And then when. So I think this is probably something good to use in that, you know, intersession meeting or intersession meetings, spring and fall. And then who's doing it would be the current librarians, because I think that is one of the classes that we all teach. So.
Great. So do you use a rubric to identify those hallmarks? And is it a yes, no toggle that, you know, they used appropriate keywords, they used, you know, Boolean tools, they accessed the appropriate database? I mean, what are you doing in terms of the rubric?
Yeah, so it's basically just a yes no checklist, but I did add in there to what extent, like so maybe I don't know how we can really judge intentionality of what they were doing or their consideration of what they were doing. It's kind of hard to gauge how much their heart was in it, or yeah, that's gonna be a little tricky adding the to what extent, but right now it's more of like a yes, no kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that one of the things that you mentioned that's really important is that, you know, you have the criteria for success, but it's also really important to do that disaggregation with all of those hallmarks so that you know where the failures are, right? You know, people are just grinding in whatever database they start with, they're not going to another one, or, right, they're not using these operators to limit things, or they're not able to come up with the right keywords, you know. I think that's as useful, right, as just having the, yes, they were able to do it, no, they weren't able to do it. Do you anticipate that this data might also be given to the instructor or the students themselves?
Maybe. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think of what the instructor would do with it. Because the focus of the class is using, you know, our classical debate, our, you know, rhetorical, you know, methods. So I'm not really, I think that it's more like they're looking for those things. Now, if it was something, if we use this in like an English 1302 argumentative assignment, yeah, I think they'd be way more interested in that, because they do have I think they do have an information literacy component that they have to meet. So I think that would be very useful for them. I mean, and as a matter of fact, that's why we're very often pulled into those composition classes, is to meet some kind of, they have an information literacy component that they have to meet. So that would be more useful for them.
Yeah, I would anticipate that in the speech class, there's also some instruction happening around the assignment, you know, that that has to do with research and, you know, identifying appropriate sources and things like that. So I was just thinking about that, because when you're doing these kinds of academic support services, you know, it seems like a piece of your feedback loop might be to let the instructor know how equipped the students seem to be, right, at the time they come in for this instruction, because that may be something that would impact when they have that instruction happen, or the frequency of instruction, or things that they might add in the classroom to support it. So it's just something to think about in terms of who could participate in the review.
Yeah, so sometimes we have these courses that they only bring us in right before a huge paper, which is kind of a almost a disservice to the students sometimes, because if they had had our instruction earlier in the semester, a lot of the things that they were struggling with would have been alleviated, you know, because like, you know, I've gotten feedback from students saying like, thank you for showing me how to get the citation out of the database, or I didn't know that we had the style guides down in the library. And I'm like, okay, this is like the final paper, you know, so.
Yeah, so it seems like that kind of information, you know, and those things that you mentioned were actually qualitative, you know, but that giving that data back to the instructor to encourage them to schedule earlier might be important. So yeah, I was just thinking about that, because ultimately, yes, you're doing this for you and your program and your instruction, but it's to support those courses, you know, and so something to think about. Spencer, tell me what you did for your sample one. I know that yours is a little more complicated because you're part of the QEP, but a lot of these may have already been identified for the QEP.
Sure. The one I did was students will develop time management skills by building and modifying a course calendar to reach their personal and academic goals. So that comes in the form first of an assignment. It's done at the very beginning of class, and they have to create a calendar for the semester where they map out everything that they know at that point. And so they're able to put on there, obviously, course times, but also at that point, the instructors talk to them about study time, different things that they build onto the calendar. There is a rubric that goes with that assignment that the instructors use to grade it and make sure that they are meeting all the criteria and putting everything on there. Of course, you know, the difficulty becomes, are they using it? You know, is that something that they're using? So while they may be completing the assignment, they're not necessarily taking it into the practical part of their lives. So that's actually something that we're working on adjusting as we look at the curriculum, is to make it to where they have to go back and revisit this assignment, revisit their calendar numerous times during the semester, and hopefully, you know, that will help, because what some of the interviews tell us when the QEP director talks to students at the end of the semester is that, you know, that time management continues to be an issue that they have. And so we try to address that by making them a little more accountable throughout. And this ties in with another one of the SLOs that deals with their goal setting and responsibilities. You know, again, the data itself comes in as numerical, but there is some other analysis that goes into it. We also have them utilize the calendar that's built into our LMS, into Canvas, and they can add to that. You try to make sure that they are understanding how that works and what that looks like. You know, we try to be as open as we can, and allowing students also, if they already have a plan, you know, you have all different types of students, as we know, that come into our classroom. For example, my high school students, they are already given something by the school district that helps them with time management and planning. And so if with some of those students, we utilize that. You also have the students that come into your classroom who have very detailed already planners out. So trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all that student, all our students. Some of our students really need to write stuff down. Some of them work better with technology. But the main thing is we're wanting them to see how important time management is. For our first-time freshmen, They are in a situation, as all of you know, they're in a situation where they've never had this much freedom. And they've never been in a situation, for a lot of them, where they have large blocks of time, sometimes before class or before they have to go to work. And so teaching them how to utilize that is part of this process. This data is collected at the end of fall, at the end of spring, and again, it's shared with instructors, with the division chair that this that Learning Frameworks falls into our Division of Language Arts and Speech, so in humanities, so it's shared there. And again, as I shared earlier, this data is also goes into curriculum committees and executive cabinet and other committees across campus. So it makes a lot of stops along the way. We do not collect data in any of our mini terms. We don't collect anything during our winter semester or in summer 1 or summer 2, or if there at any point, if there's any other kind of type of semester, is just in the long semester.
Great. So it sounds like the assignment that you're using is really the creation of a calendar, right? I mean, I know that the goal is for them to demonstrate time
Correct.
through it,
Correct.
but that right now your assessment is really, did they make a calendar? And
correct. And that's what we're working on is, you know, it needs to be more with that. We want them to use it. We want them to understand that now they need to use it because, you know, they're not in a situation now where, you know, first period I have English and second period I have science. And I mean, now it's different, and trying to teach them just how the use of time you know, how it is. I mean, if I have a student that's in a Tuesday, Thursday class, you know, it's essentially, it's a long way from from Thursday to Tuesday. And if you have a student that misses a Tuesday, you know, you could go a week without having them in class. And so, you know, that doesn't mean, you know, part of this is trying to get them to understand that course time doesn't stop just because they're not there. We keep moving along, and so they're going to have to keep moving along.
yeah, so I think that, you know, you may determine, it sounds like you're in the process of determining some additional data collection methods. You know, sometimes for this kind of thing, you know, time management, personal responsibility, social responsibility, teamwork, those are really hard to assess. But you may take, you know, the creation of the calendar is one thing, but you might consider also having a pre and post like journal or reflection. You know, at the beginning, you know, do you use any kind of tools for time management? What do you know, how well do you think you manage your time? Are you worried about this? Have you ever turned in something late? Have you ever, you know, gone to a class unprepared? And then at the end of the semester, have, you know, a reflection journal about, okay, did I use the calendar? You know, did I turn things in on time? Was I unprepared? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
some of that qualitative data.
We do a little bit of that with some discussion posts of, you know, identifying a time when they haven't done so good, but that's a good idea to see how they are at the end of the semester when, you know, they're really getting into their first semester of true college finals and things like that.
Right. Well, and it sounds like you already identified, if you've got discussion board postings, then that can be another one of your data methods, right? You can actually take those posts and look for keywords or topics, and that can be another piece of data analysis that, you know, you have that you may not have been using. You know,
Yes.
A lot of times we just do a, did they post something or not, you know, and it's just kind of a yes, no. But this one could actually be an opportunity to get that qualitative data on their time management skills because they're talking about it. Yeah. And the discussion board puts it in the kind of place where it doesn't feel like a high stakes assessment, right? Because you're really just trying to get a sense of how they're feeling and how they're internalizing the information.
Well, and we try to create it, in my class, I try to make it a safe space as well.
Right.
You know, of allowing them to, and also, you know, I have different types of a variety of diverse students, and there are some times in discussion where there are some issues that they're not comfortable with posting. So, you know, I'll tell them to email me parts of their discussion they're not comfortable with. And so, you know, giving them, like you said, when it's not high stakes, but where they can be candid, even if that's just one-on-one with me. I think that gives them the opportunity to express not only if it's working or it's not working, but, you know, gives me better insight on how I can assist them.
Right. And so, you know, I would say capture that and use it, because again, that's the assessment for improvement, right? It's not about reporting, you know, anywhere else, but it does help to inform that piece of your SLO, because you've already identified that just making a calendar isn't going to cover it. So, yeah, good work. Who wants to go next?
I can speak a little bit. So, I have it written. I guess I should look at my notes. Again, like I wasn't given any like previous program level student learning outcomes, so I wrote new ones. I don't know that they're going to use them, and so I'm trying to align what I've written with what I know that they're doing with LEAPs and in the courses. So the SLO that I looked at was students will be able to compare, contrast community served by writing an outline of problems and solutions specific to the communities they work with. And so I tried to align that one with one of our course, but like where we would get the data would be in Criminal Justice 1310. All I know is that he's gathering it from written assignments and quizzes. I've asked for the specific assignment and quiz questions, so maybe we'll get there. And so basically we would be looking at students analyzing the criminal justice process and parties involved. 60% of those students evaluated will have at least 77% on a quiz and a written assignment demonstrating critical thinking and career entry skills. I'm assuming based on all the data I've seen, it's going to be numerical. As far as data analysis, I would just say that he's just calculating those numbers, and it's going to be at the end of every fall and spring semester so that there's an annual review, and it'll be the one full-time faculty member for the program.
Great. And so, and you're anticipating that you'll be able to tag those individual questions in Canvas?
Yes, so that's what we've done with, like if you look at, say, psychology, they have a quiz, and each question in that quiz is tagged with a learning outcome, and that's the LEAP. And so, yeah, so they get that for that course. I think what they've got to make sure is that those course level learning outcomes are aligning with the program level outcomes so that they can use that data to assess the program.
And so that was my question, because I know in the learning management system, you know, as you're building it, you can tie it to the appropriate outcome. And that takes some work on the front end, right, to build it and have all the appropriate tags. Yeah. And so do you also have the program level ones, or do you anticipate you will have the program level ones listed as well, so they'll be tagging them to the program?
So I think in the last week, that's the next point that I've just kind of like pulled in. I'm like, okay, we've got to go one step further and put in our program level outcomes on top of their student learning or their course level student learning outcomes, and make sure that those are aligned to make the leaps meaningful for the program.
Right. And so then it'll take, one more sweep through where people have to add that, one more thing.
Well, they'll converse and build it in their department, and then they'll send it to our office, and we'll build it in Canvas.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you do it for them.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so that actually informed my next question, because my question was going to be, do you do a review to assess whether or not these things are tagged appropriately? And now I'm learning, well, since you're doing it, you've got fewer hands touching it, right?
Well, and it's just I guess from my perspective, and this might be wrong, but they shouldn't have to do that. If they will come to a consensus between 5 faculty members to get the same rubric and the same assignment and agree on the learning outcomes, they don't have to learn how to do that on the back end of Canvas. To go out and teach. That's our job. So, and then at the same time, if I don't build it at that admin level in Canvas, then when we run the reports, I can't just push one button. I have to push 10 buttons. And I'd rather push one button and send Chris one file.
No, that makes sense that you're handling the technical side, but they've done the cognitive work to determine, how things are tied together and to build the rubric. And that's the important part, is that they're aware when they're teaching and when they're assessing that they are tied somewhere.
And I think it was easier for us to do that with the academic side. The workforce side, it's workforce, so they don't have that background in education, that training in education. Our welding instructor, he's an expert in welding. He's not an expert in learning outcomes. So I think that's what's taking us a little bit more time, because we're really trying to start at the foundation and say, okay, let's get the mission statement and try to make it meaningful for them so that it makes sense.
Yep, that's great. Well, and I like that you're providing a supportive role and saying your job is to teach and our job is to help give you information about how things are going, and that way you can focus on what's most important. So that's wonderful that you're able to do that. Okay, so Michael, tell us what's going on with you. I know you said you're a discipline of one, so give an example for chemistry of your SLO and one of the things that you do. Are you there? I wonder if he stepped away. He shows that he's connected, but he may not actually be there. All right, so it's 11:58. We are going to end this session. You're going to get an hour break for lunch, and then we'll rejoin at 1. Remember that it is a separate Zoom meeting, so go back into your email, and this time you'll click into the afternoon session. But with that, please enjoy your lunch, and we'll get back together at 1.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.